The report came through at 0347 station time, and Admiral Cale Voss was already awake. He had not slept well in 11 years. Not since the Outer Reach campaign, not since the night he had signed the deployment orders for 6,000 soldiers and watched 4,000 of them come home. Sleep had never fully returned after that. It visited occasionally, briefly, the way a stranger might step into a room, realize they had the wrong address, and leave without sitting down. Kyle had made peace with this. He kept a chair by the viewport in his quarters and read until his eyes gave out, and when they did, he closed them and waited for morning with the patience of a man who had learned that fighting the dark only made it heavier. He was in that chair when the alert came. It was not an alarm, not precisely. The Meridian Station's command systems were calibrated to distinguish between emergencies that required immediate waking and emergencies that required immediate action. The distinction mattered. A man jolted from sleep made worse decisions in the first 90 seconds than a man who had already been sitting in the quiet, turning thoughts over in the dark. Kyle had insisted on the calibration himself 3 years ago when he'd taken command of the station, and his senior staff had looked at him the way junior officers always looked at unconventional directives, with careful, practiced neutrality that did not quite conceal the skepticism underneath. He had not explained his reasoning. He rarely did. The reasoning was usually obvious to anyone who had commanded long enough, and for those who had not, explanation was a shortcut that denied them the experience of figuring it out themselves. The alert was a soft, triple pulse. His console screen brightened to reading level without the harsh spike of a full emergency light. Text appeared. He read it from across the room before he stood up. Survey Formation Sigma 7. Beacon contact lost. Ships unresponsive, 49 of 50. One return signal confirmed. Vessel designation, Ewan's Harbinger. Condition, critical. He read it once. Then he stood. The command deck of Meridian was never truly empty. It ran on rotating shifts, 4 crews cycling through in 8-hour blocks, and at any hour of the station day, a minimum of 12 officers occupied the consoles. Cale had designed the posting schedule himself. He did not believe in skeleton crews. A skeleton, he had once told his executive officer, Commander Priya Nath, was what you found after the body had already failed. Priya was already at her station when he arrived, which meant the alert had pulled her too, which meant she had assessed it and decided it warranted presence rather than a remote report. He noted that without comment. She was good at triage. It was one of the reasons he had requested her specifically when he took command. "Talk to me," he said, moving to the central display. "Harbinger is 6 hours out," she said. She had the economy of language that came from years of working with people who didn't want it filtered. Propulsion is at 31%. Hull integrity is compromised in sections 4 through 7. Life support is running on secondary systems. We're reading 18 life signs aboard. Crew complement is 42. Cale looked at the display. The formation's last known positions were mapped across the star chart. 50 bright points arranged in the survey spread configuration, filling the border zone of Sector 9 Kappa in a wide, methodical grid. 49 of those points were dark. One moved slowly, trailing something on the sensor readings that might have been debris or might have been the ghost of structural damage vibrating through the hull. "Cause?" he said. "Unknown." Priya's voice was even. It was always even. The Harbinger hasn't transmitted anything beyond the automated distress beacon. No voice contact, no data burst, no preliminary report. Just the beacon and... She paused, not from hesitation, from the particular care of someone choosing their words because the words were strange. One recorded transmission, short range, tight beam, directed at the beacon relay rather than at us. Whatever they sent it to be logged, not to be received in real time. What did they send? She looked at him across the display. "One word," she said. "Audio file, 0.7 of a second. Voice identified as Lieutenant Commander Asha Wren, Harbinger's senior comms officer." She pressed the key. The word came through the command deck speakers at standard volume, in a woman's voice that was entirely steady, and the steadiness of it was worse than fear would have been. Run. Cale stood in the silence that followed it. No one on the command deck spoke, not because they had been told not to, because the word sat in the air the way certain sounds did, the way a crack in a ship's hull sounded different from any other crack, the way a particular kind of quiet in a field meant something had just stopped moving that had been moving a moment before. Every officer present had enough experience to recognize the quality of what they had heard. It was not a distress call. It was not a plea. It was information, delivered with the precision of someone who had assessed a situation and concluded that this was the accurate word, and the accurate word was the only useful thing left to say. Kyle let it sit for 3 seconds. Then he turned to his tactical officer. I want everything we have on Sector 9 Kappa, every survey log, every border assessment, every passive scan from the last 40 years. Full data pull, nothing filtered. And I want Harbinger's flight recorder cued for extraction the moment she docks. He looked at Priya. Prep the pale horizon. She didn't ask why. She already knew. Departure window? She said. 8 hours, he said. We'll debrief Harbinger's survivors first. Whatever they know, we know before anyone goes back out there. She nodded and turned to her console. Kyle turned back to the star chart. 49 dark points and 1 moving one, and a 7/10 of a second audio file that a trained communications officer had aimed at a relay beacon instead of at command, because she had decided that logging it for the record was more important than explaining it in real time. He thought about what that decision meant, what it said about the state of things when she had made it. He did not sleep again before Harbinger docked. The medical bay received the survivors first. Cale waited. He was good at waiting. He stood in the corridor outside the bay with his hands clasped at the small of his back and his eyes on the wall opposite, and thought about 49 ships and a single word, and let the thought sit in him without trying to resolve it. Priya came to stand beside him after 20 minutes. She had a data slate. Initial medical, she said. 14 of the 18 are stable. 2 are critical. 2 are sedated pending psych assessment. She looked at the slate. The sedated ones were the ones pulling watch on the bridge when whatever happened, happened. The medical team says they're physically uninjured. No toxins, no head trauma, no oxygen deprivation. A pause. They're just not talking. Not refusing, Kyle said. It was not a question. Not refusing, she confirmed. Just not. The attending physician used the phrase recursive shutdown, like they went somewhere and didn't fully come back. Kyle looked at the door of the medical bay. Who's talking? He said. Lieutenant Commander Wren, Priya said. She's asking for you specifically. Asha Wren was sitting up in the bed when he entered. She had the look of someone who had decided that lying down was an indulgence she had not yet earned. There were dark circles under her eyes that went beyond exhaustion into something that had been settled there long enough to become structural. She was 34 years old. She looked at Cale with eyes that had already filed the experience and were waiting to transmit the report. Admiral, she said. Her voice was the same as the recording, flat, precise, entirely steady. Lieutenant Commander, he said. He pulled the chair from beside the console and sat, because this was not a conversation that should be conducted standing. Take your time. I'd rather not, she said. If it's all the same to you. He nodded. She spoke. She spoke for 41 minutes. She did not reach for drama. She did not editorialize, did not try to make him understand how it had felt, did not search for language that would carry the weight of what she had experienced across the space between her mind and his. She understood that the gap was the gap, and that no amount of description filled it. What she could give him was sequence and fact, and she gave him both in order without omission. She told him about the formation entering the survey corridor on schedule, the passive scans running clean, the border markers passing behind them, human standard and precisely maintained, 11 minutes of uneventful transit through a region assessed as low risk and empty. She told him about the structure they had scanned. Large, artificial, old. Power signature minimal. The network flagging it as a structure of interest alongside 11 others, none of them ranked urgent. The formation continuing on its heading. She told him what she had seen on her instruments when the structure activated. She told him what happened in the 3 minutes and 51 seconds after that. She told him about pulling watch on the communications console and watching in real time 49 drive signatures drop to flat lines in sequence, each one a ship she knew the name of, each one a crew she had met in the station break room or the debrief bay or the corridors between, and not being able to do anything with her hands, because there was nothing her hands could do, and watching anyway because someone needed to watch and she was the one there. She told him she had transmitted the word because it was the accurate word. She had aimed it at the relay beacon because the relay beacon would log it permanently, and the permanent record mattered more than real-time receipt. She had concluded at the moment of transmission that if someone was going to send anyone else out there, they should know before they went. She finished. The room was quiet. Kyle sat with what she had given him. He held it the way he had learned to hold things, fully, without flinching, until the shape of it was clear. "The structure," he said. "It's still there." "Yes," she said. "Still broadcasting?" "When we left," she said, "it was still broadcasting. It had been broadcasting for 3 minutes and 51 seconds into a field of wreckage, and nothing had told it to stop, and it wasn't built to stop on its own." He looked at her. "How do you know that?" he said. "That it wasn't built to stop on its own?" She looked back at him with the eyes of someone who had watched 49 ships die and come all the way home with the information in her chest. "Because it's still going," she said, "and there's nothing left to stop it." Kyle stood. He thanked her. He walked out of the medical bay and down the corridor to the command deck and stood in front of the star chart and looked at 49 dark points and thought about a structure that had been running in the dark for longer than anyone had thought to check, patiently broadcasting into the empty space where nothing had ever been, right up until the moment something was. He thought about the word on the relay beacon. Then he turned to his crew. "Pale Horizon," he said. 8 hours. The Pale Horizon dropped out of transit at the edge of Sector 9 Kappa at 11:22 station time, and the first thing Captain Doran Mace saw on the forward display was the silence. He had expected wreckage. He had been briefed on wreckage. 49 ships, Sigma 7 survey formation, last known positions logged and transmitted in Harbinger's flight recorder before Lieutenant Commander Wren had aimed her 0.7 of a second warning at the relay beacon and run. He had read the preliminary report 3 times on the transit. He had discussed it with his senior staff. He had formed a picture in his mind of what the sector would look like when the Pale Horizon arrived. The picture had been wrong, and the wrongness was the first thing that told him this was going to be worse than the briefing. Wreckage, in his experience, looked like violence. It scattered. It drifted in the directions the force had pushed it. Pieces tumbling away from a central point of catastrophe, debris fields spreading over time into wide, irregular clouds that took years to fully disperse. He had seen battle wreckage. He had seen accident wreckage. Both had a quality of aftermath, the visual residue of something that had happened with force. What the forward display showed him did not look like aftermath. It looked like a formation. 49 ships distributed across the survey corridor in the widespread grid configuration they had entered with, each one in approximately its assigned position, each one dark and still, and entirely intact. No debris fields radiating from impact points, no hull breaches from external strike, no scorch patterns from weapons fire. The ships floated in their survey positions like pieces on a board that someone had stopped mid-game and simply walked away from. "Tactical," he said. "Full passive scan. I want hull integrity readings on every vessel." "Running," said Lieutenant Calder at the tactical console. She had the composure of someone who had decided that her feelings about what she was looking at were a personal matter to be addressed later. Mace appreciated this. He had the same arrangement with himself. "Admiral, hull integrity is..." She stopped, started again. "Every vessel is reading above 90% integrity. Average reads 94. There are no external impact events on any of the 49 hulls." The command deck was quiet. "Cause of systems failure?" said Mace. "Internal," she said. "Drive signatures terminated at the source. Atmosphere vent events consistent with deliberate purge. Communications arrays." Another pause, shorter this time. She was catching up to what the scans were showing her. Communications arrays on all 49 vessels show internal detonation at the hardware level. Sensors, same pattern. Whatever happened, it happened from the inside. Every system that could carry or transmit data was destroyed from the inside. Mace looked at the formation on the display. 49 ships, 94% hull integrity on average, drifting in their survey positions like they were waiting for a recall signal that was never going to come. "Life signs," he said. Calder's voice was even when she answered. She had made her arrangement with herself, and it was holding. "None," she said. The pale horizon moved into the formation slowly. Mace had ordered 1/4 thrust and full passive sensor deployment, because whatever had triggered this was still out there and he was not going to trigger it himself through carelessness. The briefing had included the array's last known position. He had that coordinate on a secondary display, and he watched it the way he watched things that mattered, without looking directly at it, with the peripheral awareness of a man who had learned that staring at a threat changed your relationship to it in ways that were never useful. They found the array at 11 minutes into their traverse of the formation. It was exactly where the coordinate placed it, and it was larger than the briefing had suggested, and it was still broadcasting. Mace could see the broadcast on the comms display without having the audio channel open. The signal was full power, all frequencies continuous. It had the visual profile of something that had been running a very long time without interruption, steady, unwavering, the signal strength of a system operating exactly within its designed parameters, because nothing had told it to stop, and it had not been built to stop on its own. "Open the translation buffer," he said. "But do not open a receive channel. I want to read the content without establishing signal contact." "Understood," said his comms officer, Ensign Tevis. He was young, the youngest officer on the command deck, and he was doing very well at not showing how he felt about what he was looking at. Mace noted this. He filed it for later. The translation buffer populated. Mace read it. He read it once at full speed because the first pass was always for recognition, for the broad shape of a thing, to know which category it occupied before beginning the detailed work of understanding it. He read it a second time more slowly. He read the third time almost without moving. The array was broadcasting a threat classification. The taxonomy was Galactic standard, the accepted cross-species format for threat assessment and communication that had been established 40 years ago by the Dominion Accord and adopted progressively by every spacefaring civilization that had agreed to the terms. He knew the taxonomy. Every commander of a vessel operating in border-adjacent space knew it. It was the universal language of danger, agreed upon precisely because danger did not wait for translation. The classification the array had assigned was Category 1. Extinction level threat. Hostile intent confirmed. Immediate action recommended. It had assigned this classification to the Sigma 7 survey formation, to 49 ships that had crossed a threshold in passive survey configuration, running no active weapons, transmitting no hostile signals, doing nothing except existing in that space. Mace sat with this for a moment. "How old is that array?" he said. His science officer, Commander Yeva Strand, had been running structural analysis since they'd gotten visual. She didn't look up from her console. "Thermal profile puts it at somewhere between 140 and 170 years, she said. "Power draw is maintenance level on most systems. The broadcast array itself is running at full operational capacity, but everything else is at minimum draw. It's been in standby for a very long time." She looked up. "Captain." The broadcast array was triggered by proximity. The formation crossed a threshold, and the array activated and broadcast. That's the only mechanism that fits the telemetry. It classified them as a Category 1 threat, Mace said. "Yes." "Based on what data?" She was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that comes from a mind working through something it doesn't want to arrive at. Based on whatever it had when it was last updated, she said. The taxonomy is current, Galactic standard, current format, but the threat data behind it isn't. Someone updated the broadcast format and didn't update the underlying assessment database. She paused. Captain, the war this array was built for, the conflict that put it out here in the first place. I'd have to cross-reference historical records to confirm, but I believe it ended, May said, before most of us were born. Yes, she said. He looked at the display, the array, still broadcasting full power, all frequencies, into the wreckage of 49 ships that had destroyed themselves in response to a threat classification issued by a system operating on data that was 150 years out of date. A system that did not know the conflict was over. A system that had no mechanism for knowing. A system that had been sitting in the dark at maintenance power, waiting for something to cross its threshold for a century and a half. And then something had. The flight recorder from the nearest destroyed vessel was recovered by a probe at 1347. The recovery process took longer than it should have because the probe had to navigate the formation slowly, and Mace would not rush the navigation, and his crew understood why without being told. They moved through the 49 ships with the particular care of people who had decided that the dead deserved the extra 12 minutes. The recorder was intact. This was not a surprise. The ship had destroyed its own drive, vented its own atmosphere, detonated its own comms hardware. It had not destroyed the flight recorder, because the protocol that had executed all of those actions had not included the recorder. The recorder was not a threat. It was a record. The protocol had not been built to eliminate records. It had been built to eliminate capability. To take from whatever had issued the Category 1 classification every piece of the ship that could be turned to the threat's advantage. The crew had destroyed everything that could be used against them, and preserved everything that was only for themselves. Mace thought about that for a long time, while the flight recorder data was being processed. He thought about the people in that ship, 41 men and women running a passive survey in a sector assessed as low risk and empty. He thought about the 3 minutes and 51 seconds. He thought about what it had felt like from inside the ship. If there had been time to feel anything, if the protocol had executed faster than comprehension could, or if there had been a gap, even a small one, between the broadcast and the response in which a person could think, oh, and then the thinking had stopped. He hoped there had not been a gap. He understood that hoping this was not useful, and he allowed himself to hope it anyway. Some things were outside the discipline of usefulness. He filed this in the same place he filed the other things he allowed himself. The analysis took 2 hours. Commander Strand delivered it standing at the central display, methodical, orderly, without embellishment. The array had been built by a civilization that no longer existed in the form that had built it. The war that had prompted its construction had ended by negotiated settlement. The settlement had included provisions for the decommissioning of border installations, but the process had been long and the monitoring incomplete, and in the transition period, a number of installations had been cataloged and then not revisited. This array had been cataloged. The catalog entry listed it as dormant. The entry had been accurate at the time of cataloging. The assumption embedded in the entry was that dormant was the same as safe. The assumption had not been revisited because nothing had ever crossed the threshold to question it. The format migration, Strand said. 40 years ago, when the Galactic Standard Taxonomy was adopted, every threat assessment broadcast in the known systems was migrated to the new format. The migration was automated, pattern matching on the signal structure, format conversion applied. The content was carried over without review, because reviewing the content of every automated installation in the catalog would have taken years, and the assessment at the time was that the installations were dormant. She stopped speaking and let that sit. Dormant, May said. Not inactive, she said. Dormant. Capable of returning to full function under the right conditions. She looked at him steadily. No one asked what the right conditions were, because nothing had ever met them. May stood at the display for a while. He looked at the array still broadcasting 49 ships, and the signal going out on all frequencies into the empty space around them with the patient, mechanical commitment of a system that had been built to do exactly this and had never been told to stop. He began composing his report to Admiral Voss. He wrote it plainly, in order, without reaching for language that would make it easier to receive, because there was no such language. He described the formation as he had found it. He described the array, its age, its mechanism, the taxonomy, the classification. He described the flight recorder analysis and Strand's assessment of the format migration and the catalog assumption, and the thing about dormant versus inactive. That was not the same thing and had never been the same thing, and had been treated as the same thing for 150 years, because nothing had come along to make the difference visible. At the end, he wrote his recommendation. It was 3 sentences. This installation must be decommissioned immediately. The process will require diplomatic engagement with the relevant successor authorities regarding heritage infrastructure. In the interim, this sector should be marked as a navigational exclusion zone, and no vessel, crewed or uncrewed, should be permitted to approach the threshold coordinates until decommissioning is confirmed complete. He paused. Then he added a 4th sentence. I am transmitting the coordinates and this report simultaneously to UNDF Command and to the Directorate of Survey Operations. Whoever receives this first, please make sure the other receives it as well. The word on Lieutenant Commander Wren's transmission was accurate. I have seen what it refers to. It covers the situation. He sent the report. Then he turned to his helm officer. Take us out of the formation, he said, slowly, the same way we came in. They moved through 49 ships with the care of people who understood what they were moving through. No one spoke. The engines ran quiet. The array kept broadcasting behind them. Full power. All frequencies. Into the dark. It was still going when they cleared the threshold. It would still be going long after they were home.